My guest on the show today is Tamsen Webster, who is a messaging strategist, storyteller, TEDx strategist, an idea strategist, consultant, public speaker, and probably most important, well, Tam, I don't know, like, you know me, I go for the silly, or not even the silly, but the interesting. I think you're like a wannabe ballroom dancer.
Delusional. I mean,
aspirational ballroom dancer.
I mean,
delusional,
I can actually dance.
Yeah.
I'm very delusional about how good I am.
I love that.
Like I'm a champion in my mind, but I'm,
exactly.
So, yes.
I love that.
Someday.
Well, if you listen to anybody who's, the audience who's listening knows that I will definitely hone in on that at some point today, because I'm always looking for like, what's the fun angle to bring in here? So thank you. Welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to the show today. Welcome to 2022.
Yeah. So far it's not impressing me 2022, but I am going to take it by the neck and see what we can do with it. Yes.
Exactly. We get to control our destiny to a point. And also Tamsen and I are both located in the Northeast, and where we're currently interviewing this, there's like a huge cold front sitting over our
cold front.
Where we are.
Yes. It was
quite cold.
Yeah. And another one's coming back, and I'm ticked about it. There's another one coming this weekend, at least to the Boston area. Yeah. It's supposed to get down to -2. I complain.
Well, I will say, and we don't know each other really, but this might fall really flat, but congratulations, your Patriots are back in the playoffs again. If you are a Patriots fan,
you can't not be.
I'm a Vikings fan.
I've lived in Boston for 30 years, and if you don't just get on board with the local hometown teams, I mean, you'll get run out of town eventually for it. But B, exactly. I mean, it's crazy what we've done sports wise in the last 30 years. Because when I first came to Boston for college, so this is now a long time ago, we won't talk about that. This was before the Red Sox, and we're still in the midst of the Red Sox curse. The Patriots were terrible. I mean, it was kind of just at the end of the glory days of the Celtics. The Bruins were doing, but since then, so I'd like to say that I am responsible for the turnaround in Boston sports. Clearly,
I would say that that's probably fair.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite. I'm from Minnesota originally, so I'm a huge Minnesota sports fan.
Yeah.
We haven't won a championship since 1991. So we were Boston, and we have not made the leap to anything else besides like the ever curse. It's Well,
we're going to regress to the
this
mean
podcast
eventually.
is not lamenting.
And we'll regress to the mean eventually. I think that's already begun.
We'll regress to the mean eventually.
Yeah.
All right, Tamsen, we got a lot to talk about today. So first things first, what's something that you nerd out about?
Oh my gosh. So many things. But if I were to say the kind of official, and this is true, by the way, like thing that I love, and
I like when people tell the truth on the podcast, by the way.
endlessly fascinated by. I'm endlessly fascinated from kind of a professional standpoint, but this is also personal too, about why people do the things they do. So I'm super interested in cognitive psychology and brain science and things related to influence and persuasion. And some of that's because of the work that I've done for years and years and years, both officially and moonlighting, but I'm also just really freaking interested in it. I like to say I forgot to study science, but I think I'm a scientist at heart. And at some level I can blame my high school. I had, it was a great high school. It was a prep school. Yeah. But of course it's one of those places, because it was a prep school, that you were pushed to take things like AP classes, which I did. Yep. And thanks to those AP classes, I placed out of having to take all but one science course in undergrad, which I spent on astronomy. Oh
my God. I feel like you and I have the same story. This is hilarious.
But I am obsessed with science. I love it. And I really was able to rekindle that, probably 10, 15 years ago now, when I had the opportunity to work at Harvard Medical School. And then that really just rekindled that joy and that love. So so specifically kind of cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, those kinds of things. But I really just nerd out about science, period. Like I just love science. I just love it.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about, I'm right there with you, Tamsen, until a certain point. So my relationship with science is, I think you and I are like already getting to know you. Like, we're very curious people.
Yes,
it's very obvious that you're curious. I'm a very curious person. My friend Anna tells me that I like to plug myself into the human matrix, like in the movie, how they plug you into the matrix with a thing.
Yeah.
And she's like, plug yourself into humanity.
Yes.
I love science up into the point that I have to do any math. And then I'm like, I don't want to touch that. I don't like math. I like the science. I like the concepts of science and why it makes a difference. I could literally care less of the how though. I'm like, oh, physics is really interesting.
Yes.
But I don't care about the math.
And I'm glad that other people study it so that I can then, So exactly. I would say that I am an amateur applied scientist. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Yes. Applied science
so you can do the research and figure out the science, and then I'm going to figure out what to do with it. And I just love that. I just love figuring out how to make things work. And a lot of how you get there is science. So I nerd out about science.
Yeah.
Science.
Yeah.
I love science.
Science. There it is.
Yep.
And I think we're going to actually get into this more. I've actually got some questions brewing to ask you about this, but next I want to talk to you about something that is inside of your comfort zone. It's going to be outside of somebody else's. I'm going to do what I do to a lot of my guests. Okay. I'm going to take one thing right off the table because it's just way too easy.
Okay.
Public speaking is not allowed to be the answer here because you do this for a living. But so many public speakers are like, I'm really comfortable public speaking. I'm like, you're literally a speaker. I would hope that would be the thing. So what's something besides public speaking that you're comfortable with that is outside of somebody else's comfort?
Seeing and even taking both sides of an argument.
Oh yeah. That is so outside of most people's comfort zone.
Yeah. And
totally.
And that's part of where my curiosity leads. Like, like I said, I'm fascinated by why people do what they do. And so that leads naturally to, I'm fairly like, if I run into somebody whose perspective on something I just don't understand, then I'm obsessed with figuring out like, okay, well, from their perspective, why does this make sense? Like, why does it make sense to them? And eventually you all get to a point where I could probably argue equally for either side of a situation. I mean, I have very strong opinions of my own. But I think that's, given the nature of the work that I do with helping people figure out how to get their own message across, it's helpful to be able to do that. And I find that it just helps me navigate, from an everyday life standpoint, more not be quite as sucked into the outrage cycle that can happen, in social and in conversations and whatever. And again, it doesn't mean that I don't hold my own views very, very strongly, but I do believe very strongly in understanding where other people are coming from and why something that they do that may not make sense to me makes sense to them. And I don't think that's in a lot of people's comfort zones, but it's definitely a skill that I have acquired intentionally over time.
Nor is it that's an amazing skill. The first thing I wanted to say about that is, boy, if only there were some places you could find people that disagree about things in the world, especially as Americans.
Oh, Lord.
It must be really hard to find those topics.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that is not a profitable idea. There's not a lot of profit in taking both sides. It's like the profit, like if you look at how the media does things or the way that people make money that are kind of like information age, you kind of have to take a strong side in order to like make a lot of money and like controversial issues. Being in the middle is kind of like the thing. It's like nobody wants to hear about being in the middle or somebody who's like, yeah, I can see both sides. It's like not interesting to the general population.
Yes.
At least that's my opinion on it.
True. But if there is a way to monetize it, I think that I have. And the fact that, the work that I do is working with people who are very strongly convinced of the value of their own idea, and they have to sell it to people who aren't. And so that means understanding from that other person's perspective, under what conditions would they consider your idea to be a good one? And so, and because it's not in people's comfort zones to actually think about what other people are thinking about, which is, by the way, it has a name. It's called cognitive empathy. Where emotional empathy is being able to understand what other people are feeling. Cognitive empathy, a learnable skill, is being able to understand what other people are thinking. Because that's not in a lot of people's wheelhouse, it's not a skill that I think we've paid a lot of attention to in the last few years. It comes in really handy. So people value it because it's not something that most people either want to develop for themselves or have the time to. So I'm a professional devil's advocate and a resident skeptic. Yeah. So I
love that. Professional devil's advocate. That's amazing. That's going to be the title of your episode, I think. Professional devil's advocate. People be like, that's really intriguing. I need to know more. That's awesome, Tamsen. Well, what's if we're going to look at the flip side of that question, which is so perfect, since you like to look at the flip side of questions, what's something that is outside of your comfort zone that you know is going to be inside of somebody else's?
Oh my gosh. Spontaneous, unstructured anything.
Really?
Oh yeah.
You're a hard J on the Myers-Briggs?
I am a hard J on the Myers-Briggs.
Hard J, yeah.
Hard J. I don't know that I could be more J. I have, good friends in my circle who, and colleagues and whatever that will be like, yeah, just pick up the phone, call me whenever. And I'm like, you understand that will never happen, right? Like I don't just pick up the phone. I don't just like, oh, I'll give you a call. Like, I just don't do that. And I mean, I should say that is like, it's as much an issue of the fact that I don't change modes very quickly. Like transitions from like one mode to another are
like you don't context shift very quickly.
Yeah, I don't.
Gotcha.
So, but because like when we're on vacation, my husband and I have no problem like just shutting down like obligations. At the same time, I still like to know what we're going to be doing. So things unstructured, anything truly like an unstructured approach to time, to projects, to whatever is deeply uncomfortable to me, as is like, hey, let's just do this. I'm like, what? No. So not in my comfort zone. Spontaneity.
Yeah.
I'd like to think I'm so fun though. It's just planned.
Of course. But you might be the fun person who's also like, Tamsen's got us covered. We don't have to do anything because we know she's got us covered.
Yeah, I was the lead of most group projects.
Yeah, but also as like a speaker and as an author and all the things that you do, I'm sure that you're extremely reliable.
I try to be.
You're going to be there on time. Yeah, right. Like that's an important thing. So I'm thinking for myself, I'm a J in the Myers-Briggs, and I'm pretty far. If we look at Myers-Briggs as J to the left, P to the right. Yeah. I'm pretty far J. Yeah. Except I forget which metric it is. And it's like the ability to be improvisational. I'm all the way P.
Oh,
which
nice.
skews me back a little more to the middle.
I can see that.
So it's like a real statistical anomaly because I love to improvise and like figure it out on the fly, but I'm also like super on time. I like to have a plan. I like to know what we're doing. Yeah. Which is why when I have podcast guests, I'm like, here's the questions I'm going to ask. Like, we're just going to make it up as we go along.
Yes. Which I can generally handle like free flow of that thing unless like your questions. So I do appreciate you sending them in advance. They're questions that require a little bit of thought. Those are the ones where I do not like it when someone springs that on me. They're like, someone once I was like, when's the last time somebody was like super nice to you? And I know that sounds like an easy question. Yeah. But I'm like, oh, it's just the kind of question that you want a little bit of time to think about. And those, so that's a great example of like, I can take most things like in my comfort zone, like no problem. Just fire it at me. I can answer, but something that isn't in that normal lane of my thinking, I want a little bit of time to think about. I'm like, I'm not going to script my answer. Do you like, I want to think about it.
Yeah. I want to have one more question for you here. Do you like to do like panel interview, unscripted Q&As where you don't know what's like where the audience is asking things?
Oh, I love that. That's fun. That's actually fun.
It's in your area of expertise,
it is, right?
Because you're already up there as an expert.
It's fun for me. Well, and I also, I've been a message and brand strategist for 25 years now. And for 13 of those years, I moonlighted as a Weight Watchers leader. And that's actually where I learned to think on my feet as far as questions coming from anywhere go. I mean, because we'd have a topic we were discussing in any given week, but who knows what someone's going to bring in and want to talk about. And my job is to keep the conversation moving, but also to, advance knowledge and comfort levels and get people to change behaviors. And I got to tell you, after 13 years of that, there is nothing I haven't seen, heard, dealt with.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I was like, you know what?
It's such an emotional, personal topic.
Yeah. But also just the nature of like how far afield someone's comment or disruption or whatever can come in and so I feel very, very confident in my ability to take questions, and tie it back to some main point that we're trying to get across or something like that. But that kind of on the fly thinking it's also very similar to the work that I do with clients, because that's my job too, is like, okay, I see what you're trying to say. We need to make it make sense to other people. And so that's a place where, from an improvisational standpoint, I'm able to just say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? How does this come up with, how does this fit? How does that
totally makes sense.
work?
That's awesome, Tamsen. Yeah. All right. So as I've introduced you and we've talked a little bit about, you do a lot of speaking.
I do.
And I know you train speakers. You're in the speaking world.
I am.
It's one of the things you do.
It is.
So if I was to give you the mini TED, the 5-minute mini TED talk, we'll call it a micro TED talk.
Yes.
5 minutes only. You get to stand on the red dot for 5 minutes and speak about anything you want to. And we all get to view it on YouTube, the TED channel. The whole world gets to see it. What is it that you would talk about, and what would you want us to do at the end of that speech?
So one of the concepts of kind of cognitive psychology that I am deeply passionate about is what I call, as I refer to, as smart, capable, and good. The official name for it in psychological and mental health circles is unconditional positive regard. An unconditional positive regard is entering any interaction with someone with, again, back to the way I like to put it, with the belief that they are a smart, capable, and good person. And because that allows you, it's a basic human need to be seen as smart, capable, and good. Even if we don't believe for ourselves that we're smart, capable, and good, we really want to be seen by other people as smart, capable, and good. And that simple validation of somebody else's smart, capable, and goodness goes so far just to healing a lot of wounds that are there, of opening the door to somebody else's curiosity about you and whatever you might be there to talk about, But it also, very much to that point that we were talking about earlier, if you enter something, and a conversation with someone with that belief that they are smart, capable, and good, they are, you are taking that first step towards cognitive empathy, towards really understanding how that person sees the world. So the call to action from that would be to find the reason you understand for someone to do or think the thing that they do. To look for that. Yeah. Because and it starts with that smart, capable, and good perspective. And I just think you end up seeing a much more textured, layered, kind of deeply interesting and nuanced world, and people in it. And it allows you to soften the black and white edges that we've been conditioned into, and see a lot more of the beautiful shades of gray that exist in between. Yeah.
I love that. There's, I talk about this in the show. I'm a leader at a coach training program, and we have our own version of that when you're coaching clients. And we call it, you look at your clients as whole, complete, and perfect as they show up. Yeah. Because likely the clients aren't going to see themselves that way.
Correct. Yes.
So and it doesn't mean that there's not things to work on, but it takes you out of the problem solving. And so Tamsen, I hear a problem, and how are we going to fix it? How are we going to solve it? That may not be what you need in the moment. Right. So if I view you as and I think that's the power of therapy and coaching and sort of your work you do, is you have somebody on the outside who's I don't really see you the way you see yourself in that negative light or whatever it is. The other thing I hear there, I was taught this a couple of years ago, is I actually had a podcast guest talk about what would happen if we all assumed positive intent.
Yes.
So go into the conversation hey, Tamsen and I, we don't agree on this thing, but we both want to, we're both here positive. We both think there's so much power in that. And I come from the sales world. That is not generally a thing. No. Right? It's generally, this person's trying to sell me something, or even you're a business development person, right? You're doing business, they're going to sell me something. They're going to do no, positive intent is I want to make an impact for you, and we're going to trade time for value. Right. And it's going to be a mutually beneficial thing versus, I think,
well, smart, capable,
that'd be such a game changer.
Oh my gosh. Yes, it would. And smart, capable, good also does not show up in sales conversations, because if I have one big old bone to pick, it's with the challenger approach to
the challenger selling. Methodology.
Yeah. I mean, not that it is fundamentally flawed. It is not, but it is so easy to get wrong, and so easy to fall into this trap of, I know more than you do. And even though the fundamental structure of it is solid and strong, even Donna Miller's story brand, in like taken the wrong way, can lead someone, again, assuming smart, capable, and good, quite unintentionally into the position of making the person that you're talking to feel wrong, stupid, uninformed. And there is a kind of curiosity. See, I told you I nerd out about this. That's known as deprivation curiosity. I don't know a thing and I want to know a thing until I can fill the gap in my knowledge. And that's where the attention getting power of a challenger mindset, or the, I'm going to be your mentor on this hero's journey kind of thing, can get to. The challenge with deprivation curiosity is that once that gap is filled, it's over. And so what you're the more powerful kind of curiosity to create is what's known as interest curiosity, or I curiosity, which is, helps me move towards something that I want, not from a position of lack, but from a position of this will help me grow. This will help me be even more smart, even more good, even more capable. And that, I think, I've seen that the shift that can happen in conversion rates and in better qualified leads, whatever, when you actually make that shift towards, I'm not going to be here to tell you that there's a problem that you didn't know you had. I'm here to tell you why it's been so difficult for you to solve it based on all the information that's been out there so far, which is not your fault, by the way. Conventional wisdom says X, Y, or Z. But if we take a different perspective, which you can also agree is valid because I've taken the time to understand your perspective, you can see that there's actually a new alternative. There's some other way for us to go. Yeah. And people just respond to that better. Like long term, one of the things I talk about in one of my talks is that pain is the enemy of long-term change. So can you scare someone into action? Can you force them into action? Absolutely. Who among us has not been like, oh my gosh, I have to do this because whatever. But long term, people will not continue to do anything that does not make them feel smart, capable, and good. So why start there? Because you may be able to get a sale, but you may not be able to retain that customer. And I think, people have seen that. Challenger's great for getting sales. It's very difficult for maintaining the, what do you say to them when they're already your customer? Because now you can't fault what they were doing before, because they're with you, so it's just a really interesting challenge. And it's one of those things that obviously I'm a little passionate about. But I think it's just, it can be so fundamentally world changing, not just for you, which is important, but for the people that you talk to and that you work with and that you serve. And that to me is very important. I mean, why not help people feel better? Why not be of use to them? Why not kind of just paint a little bit of a brighter picture in their world?
Tamsen, I'm over here nodding. I'm like, I'm trained in challenger sale from my past career. So I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And there's two things that get missing, and then we'll take a really brief commercial break. But you're talking to somebody who actually knows exactly what you're talking about. I've been through it a couple times. Yeah. Two things to me get missing. One, relationship. So if you're challenging somebody, but you don't have any relationship, or the customer doesn't trust you, none of what you say matters. And two,
correct.
It's what's so funny about challengers. Like, we're putting you through a challenger training sale. And then like you have sales reps out there who are not experts on what they're talking about at all, trying to put themselves out there as that, which just creates, it's just a mess.
It's a mess.
Right? 'Cause there's no trust. Well, and I think those two kind of coincide.
They do. Yeah.
I happen to have gone through it at a company that we actually did a nice job, and I actually did become an expert in the thing. It was in like mobile cybersecurity. So I could talk, for days about that stuff. But I've seen so many challenger sales where I'm like, you actually know less about this than I do, and you're trying to pass yourself off as like, my problem, but like, how would you know?
That's right. Yeah.
So interesting.
And I believe that's because the challenger, effective challenger, again, let me reinforce, in the right hands with the right understanding is an enormously powerful approach. Yeah. But if you don't come into it with the perspective that you may be an expert in whatever it is you're trying to sell, but the person that you're selling to is an expert in their business, And you are not. Full stop. You are not an expert in their company unless you've worked there. And even then, your information is out of date. Like, your job is to find the intersection of that expertise. And so it means that you must start with that belief that whatever they're doing now, whatever commercial insight that you have to bring them, is possible because they've been trying to do the right thing, that back to the positive intent. And if you don't give them credit for that, you're 100% right. Particularly if you've got no relationship with them, just the fact that you're questioning their current approach when you come in from out of nowhere, they're like, that's not going to happen. You know, back to my nerding, shoot the messenger effect is real. Like, people don't like people who give them bad news and who make them feel not smart, not capable, not good. So if this is a new relationship, why in the heck would you go in and be like, well, I know better? Again, it might work short term. Yeah.
Short term. Yeah.
And if that's what you're looking for, more power to you. But I'm
well, I think the last thing I'll say about this is I think also the old, more like enterprise licensing model where you bought once and then you paid a small maintenance fee per year.
Yeah.
It worked a little bit better, but now with SaaS, and it's like you buy and then we need you to renew every year in order to actually make a profit on you.
Yeah.
And this is why customer success has become so important in the, in the software world now. So, man, I feel like I want to have a whole nother podcast episode where we just talk about this. I feel like I actually have another friend/guest. I'd be like, oh, the three of us would have a really fun conversation about this.
I'm game.
Stay tuned and you'll get an invite for that soon. But Tamsen, we're going to take a very brief commercial break and we'll be right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Tamsen, we're back.
I'm glad to be back. I'm glad you brought me back.
Yeah. I brought you. Yeah. I don't generally be like, and we're back, but Tamsen left because this, I don't agree. Wouldn't it be funny if I was like, you know what? I just don't agree with this person. You're done. I'm shutting you off. I'm going to do some improv.
I just talked about seeing both sides of an argument. And then you'd be like, no, I don't. No, we're done.
You're like, be like, so Tamsen, we need to talk. I just disagree with everything you just said. And you're not going to sway me I'm standing on my soapbox and you're not pushing me off this thing.
Okay.
All right. So I have a nice big old open-ended question for you.
Okay.
That I know you've got some answers for, because if somebody didn't have an answer for this question, I'd be very concerned about their ability to answer anything.
Yes.
So what do you want us to know about you?
Oh my Lord. That I am an unapologetically a combination of conflicting things. Meaning, I just I'm a deep lover of the arts, and I also geek out about science, and that I am wildly opinionated, and yet I really value seeing and seeking out both sides of things. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the thing you're looking for here is more kind of like the juicy bits of like what comes from whatever. And I think from that,
actually no.
Oh, okay.
This is actually a genuinely curious question.
Yeah,
I've had
all sorts of
I couldn't even begin to tell you, oh my gosh, some hilarious stuff, some deep stuff. I've had somebody give me their life story. I've had other people be like, I want you to know this thing. And it was like 30 seconds. I'm like, great.
Yes.
Like what?
Well, I want you to know.
What do you want us to know?
That I still have a baby tooth in my mouth at the age of 47.
Wow.
There you go. I know. Or alternatively,
baby tooth.
I do. I know that. Talk about holding on to your
I've never heard of that before.
I am a freak of nature. I am my dentist's favorite person. Yes. Well, here you go. Genetically in my family, in a straight line from at least my grandmother, if not further, the women in that maternal line have been missing 4 adult teeth, at least 4 adult teeth.
I've never heard of this. It's so interesting.
And I was missing 6. So I got to be extra special. So I was missing 4 adult molars, and lucky me, 2 of my wisdom teeth, just don't exist. Like they just never I know those cells never developed in my head. But when you have 12-year molars or whatever they
really
are,
fascinating.
that are not supposed to be in your head anymore. Obviously they are not, those teeth are not built for 47 good years of service. So yeah, eventually the 3 of them now have been replaced by other wildly expensive dental products. But there's one that is still hanging out with its extra little, it's got like a hat. It's got like an adult tooth hat sitting on top.
Adult tooth hat.
That's been there literally since I've been 16. So yeah, so it's been in my mouth, in that current format for like 40 years. It's a good little
that is
30
a
years.
Great answer to that. That's a great answer to this question that you want us to know that. Like this is why I asked this question, because you never know. Before we move on, I have a question for you since we're meeting on video today.
Yes.
And I have to say it's a compliment / question that you probably get a lot.
All right.
You have a Mickey Mouse ears behind you.
Mm-hmm. I do.
You have what I think is a Lego. Is that
it's a Lego Big Ben.
London Lego?
Yep. There's also a Lego
Big
flat
Ben.
iron over here too. So yeah.
Lego flat iron.
Yeah.
And are those Marilyn Monroe?
They are Lego.
Andy Warhol? Are those Legos?
Those are also Lego.
Oh my.
Yeah. Lego Maryland.
I'll tell you so what I'm going to do is, when you do the video promo for this, you have to see your background is fabulous. And one of my questions is if I was being interviewed, what do you nerd out about? I still love Legos. When I was like, oh, those, the Andy Warhols. And I'm like, no, wait a second. Those are Lego Marilyn Monroe, Andy Warhols. And I'm like, and the reason I know about the Big Ben is my daughter has that. And I was like,
nice. And
she has the flat iron. So I'm like, cause they actually make a New York.
Yeah.
That's,
set.
we're in New York. They make a New York set. It's like Statue of Liberty,
Skyline. Yep.
Freedom Tower, flat iron. I'm like, wow. So your background is fantastic. I'm sure you must get questions about this all the time.
I do sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it's also an homage to my 2 sons. So my boys put the Lego Marylands together for me. So, it just
so
happened
good.
that, I wanted these fully honest. Like I just wanted them like so badly from the first time they were released, because Lego released these kind of art Lego sets. 4 years ago.
Really cool.
There's a Marvel one, and then there's the 4 Beatles from the I think from the Let It Be album, whatever. And then there was these like Warhol Marylands, and I was like, oh my God. But in my other apartment, and we moved apartments this past summer, we literally had no wall space, and they're a very distinct colorway, as you can tell. Like they're bright blue, bright pink, bright yellow. And it didn't exactly go with the rest of our decor. But when we moved, I was able, I now have we turned a guest bedroom into my office space. And I was like, I love me some color. And so I was like, I am getting my Lego Marylands. And so it's a lovely way just to be like to have my kids around me without, necessarily like the traditional pictures of my kids. But yeah, it's a little homage to time I spend with my boys.
Yeah. And the thing I will say about this before we move on, because you can tell I'm obsessed with this, is the colors just make me happy.
Awesome. Yeah.
Like immediately.
Yes. Well, I do too. Like,
it's just a great color palette.
Well, thanks. Yeah. It's kind of black and white and crazy color in my office. And that's so cool. How I love it.
There you go. So now we know about your baby tooth. And for those who are listening to this, know what I'm looking at as we're talking.
You're like, there's Lego.
Book a call with Tamsen and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's pretty cool. Exactly. All right, Tamsen. So we'll just get right into it. What do you want to ask me about that I can answer for you and everybody listening?
So it's a question that I'm always fascinated by with other people, but what is the gap that you think that you exist to close? Right. What is the gap? Like, so just for example, I like to say that I'm obsessed with closing the gap between, potential and reality. Like that's the thing that I'm really, that's the question I love to help people answer for themselves. So I'm curious, what is the gap that you like to close?
Oh, this is so perfect. I do personal brand strategy work.
Yeah.
So I think you do mostly for companies. Yep. I do it for like you or me.
Yep.
And so I actually know this exactly because this is one of the things that we generate with our clients about what's the one word problem you solve? How do you uniquely solve it? And what's the output? So for me, mine's pretty simple. I am uniquely qualified to solve the gap for my core audience that I work with that like is my business, stagnation, and my unique way I do it is through my drive and energy.
Love that. Well, I'm glad I asked a question you had a ready answer for. That's always not terrifying.
And I had no idea, but I'm like, oh, this is easy. It's like a personal branding question
like,
at the end of the day.
Oh, that was easy. Yeah.
I'm like, yes. All right. So let's do a little, what else do you have for me? Like that was easy.
All right. I want to know.
And by the way, Tamsen, that's also written on a spreadsheet somewhere in my computer. So I'm like, oh, I actually have that answer.
You have that answer. So it was easy to put. All right. Tell me one experience from your before this moment in life that you feel really set you on the path that you're on now.
Yeah, I know that moment actually. So I have two things that come to mind. I'm just going to tell the very quick story of how I ended up here with you today.
Okay.
So in June of 2018, I was in my corporate career doing well, having, fine, typical, like, I don't know if it's a midlife. I don't think I have a midlife crisis. Selling Challenger, pissing off customers because I pretended to be an expert. But, and I remember saying to my buddy, Andrew, hey, I'm kind of bored with my life. Like we had a really young daughter at the time. We live in New York City. Things are good. My wife is amazing. Marriage is good. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong, right? Like nothing wrong. And also I'm just like, I don't know, like there's got to be more.
Yeah.
And so my buddy's like, oh, you should go take an improv class. I was like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to do that. Let me go do that. Where do you think I should do it? And he gave me a recommendation for a place in New York City. I did that. And I did a level 0, which is literally a bunch of people who've never done improv in their life, who have no idea what we're about to do. We just like get in a room and have fun. And I remember in the very first break, the teacher's like, hey, and by the way, if anybody here is interested, I also do personal and executive coaching. And I was like, what's that? Because I never had that in my career. Like I never had anybody do that. I never worked with a coach. And I was like, oh, all right, let me have a conversation with her. Had one conversation. I hired her. And that's the genesis of why we're here today.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Because I actually had somebody who's like, hey, I don't really think this is what you want. And I'm going to tell you she didn't tell me that's not what I want, but like and you do coaching work, so you know how it works. Through working with her, I actually learned about what I really wanted to do and how I wanted to really be. If I was still in corporate sales, I would not have a podcast. That's pretty apparent because I would be selling stuff right now.
Exactly. No outlet
being
for
annoying
that
Challenger sales. So that was really, really kind of like,
sorry, CEB. Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even CEB anymore.
Fine. Challenger's fine. But I, I look at that and I'm like, we all have those moments in our life. They're like, that's a pivotal moment is like, oh, like, let me talk to that person. Let me start working with them. And I didn't really know why. I just knew I wanted to intuitively. And I was also somebody, prior to like, when I was in corporate, I was like, here's how we do it. A little bit of black and white. Because in sales, you kind of have to be. It's like you either sell something or you don't. You either win or you lose. You either make a bunch of money or you get fired. Like there's not a whole lot of in between in sales. And if you're not good at it, you just leave anyway and go do something else. So that was so for me, that fundamental shift was actually like, there's a lot of gray in the world. And now I'm like I think you and I like, I'm a big gray, like, most things is not factual. It's all subjective. And so that was just such a pivotal moment for my career, but even more importantly, just how I see the world now compared to, living inside the corporate machine for so long. You just kind of get, you just like in the corporate, I call it the corporate matrix. You're just like, oh, this is the world I live in. This is what I do. This is how I make money. And
it all makes sense when you're in it. But when you sit outside,
it all makes sense when you're in it. But then you're like, when you take the other pill and you're like, oh, wait, there's this whole other world, this stuff that people do that they like doing.
What? I know. Yeah.
They enjoy their job.
Totally.
Crazy.
It's funny. I had, so like I said, I'm a collection of conflicting things. And so when I went to college, originally I went to study business. And then after a year, I got bored. I had a really great counselor, an academic counselor who, I know her job was to keep me at BU, which is where I was going, Boston University. But because I was thinking about transferring, I was like, well, maybe I'll be more interested in someplace else. And she was like, well, we have this program here at BU where you can get another degree. And so, back to some of those AP classes I was mentioning before, she was like, you have enough credits, like actually that you've already got like almost a year's worth of credits that you can use to this. So what I did was I added a liberal arts degree, so I added a degree in American Studies. So I got my business degree, but I also got a degree in American Studies. And then when I went to grad school, which I did right after, which is in and of itself fairly unusual. So, yeah, I don't know that I recommend business school at 21, but I'm glad that I did it. I wish that business school had continued education because I love school. I just do. I want to go back. But when I got my MBA, I then consciously looked for a dual degree program so that I also got a master's in arts administration, which allowed me to kind of perpetually sit outside of the matrix of both of them. Right. So I never fully drank, we shouldn't use that phrase anymore. I never fully kind of was inside the matrix of nonprofits where it was just like, we're all this, but we totally ignore the fact that we actually have to make money. That's unfair. Nonprofits are totally aware of that, but they have a different appreciation for how they go towards it. And the same thing from the corporate standpoint, I was like, this stuff about purpose and mission actually makes a difference. So having that kind of dual perspective, which that seems to be one of our themes today, is one of the things I'm very grateful for. And I don't know whether or not I was already wired that way, and that's why I ended up doing that, or whether it was a product of kind of, semi-accidental choices in my life.
Probably a little bit of both,
I'm
right?
Sure,
some nature, some nurture. Yeah, that's really cool, Tamsen. All right. I feel like if I had you ask me another question from not, it would be something even more probing. So I'm a little, you got me on my edge here. So I'm going to take the mic back, the virtual mic back. We're going to make you improv for the next 10 minutes. We're just going to create an improv scene. Fine. And we might end early. We might not. I'm just not sure how this plan's going to go.
As long as we I know we both have hard stops because I have a dog.
As long as we end it on time, we're both like, So I have a couple other questions for you. First one is, what's the thing that you're most proud of, Tamsen?
I am most proud of the fact that I have to date raised two thoughtful humans. To date,
I like that. I like as of today.
They're great.
They're good.
Things can happen. No, I believe very strongly in Khalil Gibran's poem on children that children come through you, right? They're not of you. Like you don't get to decide like who they are, because they are who they are. And the best you can do is kind of give them, as my father described it, give them guardrails, right? Just give them kind of general, like lots of room to roam, but just general understandings of the way to be. And when it comes to some of these things that I'm most passionate about, like giving people benefit of the doubt, like looking for why somebody would do something that makes sense, kind of seeing both sides of something, being of use to people. That's a very important thing to me too, to be useful to people, to contribute, to help. Those, I know I couldn't make sure that they had those qualities, but they are wonderfully thoughtful kids. They all have their moments, don't we all?
Yes,
but I would say that, for somebody who I said that, spontaneous, unstructured anything is outside of my comfort zone, which meant parenthood. 100%.
I was going to say, so basically being a parent.
It's been outside my comfort zone. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, they've made it to 12 and 14.
Yeah.
And they're pretty great. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm really proud of.
Just the fact that they are willing to build 4 Marilyn Monroes for your wall, unbelievable. They're already winners in my book. They like Legos, like I do. They're good. They're good to
awesome.
go.
Yeah,
that's awesome, Tamsen. What's something you're afraid that might actually be true about you?
That I don't, and I'm not as self-aware as I think I am, which is 100%. I know that that's true, because that's true of all humans. But I think the thing that I'm most afraid of is that I have a blind spot that I don't see. And, and because I am ruthless in trying to root them out in myself, and trying to do that and trying, because again, and the grace I extend to others, I try to extend it to myself as well. But, integrity is one of my core values, like this kind of complete consonance with, what you say and what you do. And so I actually, that is the thing that I'm deeply afraid of, is that somehow I'm not living something with integrity, that I'm saying something that is different than how I'm living it. And so that's a constant practice for me to reassess what I'm doing or what I'm saying, to make sure that those are in line with each other.
Yeah, you actually answered the second part of my question, which you don't have. So as a psychology person, you're going to appreciate this, but and I'll caveat this because you're somebody who lives in this space too. I had one guest who's like, "Oh, I don't think I do anything." And I'm like, "You're a liar." So my follow-up to this is always, so what do you do to compensate for that fear?
Yeah.
And so you just kind of outlined what you do. Like, you're always like internally looking. So you're strategizing, or you're always taking a look. The one person who said, they're like, "I'm afraid of this." And then they're like, "I don't think I compensate for that." I'm like, "You're a liar." You should see a therapist,
Everybody does.
Coach, or read a book. Like that's how we're built as humans. Are like, the things that we're afraid about ourselves are the things that we overcompensate for. And we all do that in various ways.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think I actually called them out on the show, and they're like, "No, I don't think so." I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I just the more you know, the more you can know. This is one of the most fascinating things about the human brain, because the brain is like an ever building quilt, like, so that any piece of information you lay into your head, like, that gives you now, depending on what's already there, at least 3 more sides, sometimes, at least 1 more side, if not 3 more sides, or something, to attach other things to. And so the compensation there is just to continue to understand where people's blind spots show up, so that I can have a better sense of where mine might be, and what I can do to either close them, or to mitigate whatever damaging effects they might have on me or somebody else.
Yeah. I think that this is one thing for me, like being, 5 or 6 years and like really like investing in personal growth, is there is an element that I believe is true about ignorance is bliss. Because as you start to learn these things, like if you don't know your blind spots, or you don't care, it's actually much easier to kind of do what you want to do.
Oh, sure.
At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Which is, I said this to my wife today. I'm like, man, I wish there was some times where I didn't like invest all this time, money, and energy into personal work. Cause I'm like, it's kind of easier to just like coast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not take a look. But at the end of the day, I don't think you're not, I wasn't really moving towards my full potential.
Yeah.
So now as
that.
a parent, it's kind of the same thing. I have younger children, one of them isn't even talking yet, so we don't talk about these things. But even our 5-year-old, talk a little bit about, hey, how do you want to be at school today? Because yesterday you had like a little run-in at the playground.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. I really like that.
Yeah.
All right, Tamsen, how can people connect with you, find you, follow you, see you speak,
Sure,
read your book, like all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. The easiest way to know, all things Tamsen Webster are at tamsenwebster.com. The easiest way to know kind of all the exciting things, like, what I'm doing next and where I'm speaking and what I'm thinking about, is to sign up for my newsletter. So,
Perfect.
Plug that. Easy to find at tamsenwebster.com/newsletter. That comes out every week. I rotate, 1 week is usually on a topic of message related. So it's usually based on a video called Message in a Minute. And then I kind of go into more depth. And on the off weeks, I kind of find one of those, stories, studies, stuff you can use. I call it my swipe file, and feature one of those, and how people could potentially use it in their own information, presentations, content, etc. So I have fun doing it. I have fun finding those things and sharing them. Because the world is a crazy place. And I would be doing that exploration anyway, and I can't possibly use all that information. So I love just sharing it back out. Cool.
I'm definitely signing up. That sounds awesome. It's like all in the realm of the things that I love.
It's fun. Yeah.
All right, Tamsen, last, this is not a question. This is a request, not a demand, a request, but I've never had anybody say no to it. And I'd love if you would leave us with some words of wisdom, and short words of wisdom that would fit on like a Post-it note or a little, like a Instagram post. Like, what do you got for us? What words of wisdom? They can be yours, or they can be something that you just like that's out there in the world.
Well, from a self-serving standpoint, I would say that the most powerful thing that I can give to people is to say to find your red thread. In other words, find the story that you tell yourself that is the one that guides you to your best things, because it's already there, and you've already built it. There's no need to go do something else. So the kind of non-self-serving version of that is to say that what got you here to where you are right now will get you there to where you want to go. So
will get you there, because that's like that. I like the juxtaposition.
What got you there? What got you here will get you there. Yep.
I love it. Well, Tamsen, thank you so much for being on.
My pleasure.
Absolute pleasure to meet you. And we will talk again very soon.
I hope so, Jason. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks so much, Tamsen. All right. I'm going to get a picture for Darcy real quick.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.